Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Dr. Wayne Philmore is back with us.
Hello there, my good sir.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. I got my camera on. I think it's sideways or something like that. Let's see. Not I'm upside down.
Yeah.
Oh,
Might like the upside down.
there we go. Okay. I think that's the best we're going to get.
Now you're good.
Okay. There we go.
All right, tonight we'll be discussing magic in the Bible. You might not
Yeah.
have heard of it, but it's there in a different way.
Yeah, pretty much. Very different way.
Yeah, and what's pretty interesting is that, Wayne here is the one that recommended this topic. He said it was something that was interesting him.
Yeah, the magic in the Bible is very interesting because when we think about magic over here in the West, we think demonic, fallen angels. What are some other things that people think?
like summoning element spells like Final Fantasy, Avatar.
Yeah, Disney World stuff like that. So like, magic in the ancient world wasn't exclusively to demonic powers, and our understanding of magic as Christians sort of is a caricature of what magic in the ancient world actually was. So supernatural things in the ancient world was magic. So for example, the story about Moses and his staff turns into a snake, and the Egyptian pharaohs or the Egyptian priests, they're able to do the same thing. And people will always ask Christians, what is the difference between what Moses did and what the Egyptian priests did? And the answer is, well, there isn't really any big difference. The only difference is the conduit or the source of the power. So we make a distinction today between this is a miracle and this is magic. In the ancient world, that distinction didn't exist. There was no this is magic and this is miracle. That didn't exist. That's like a very modern interpretation of it. So it all was magic. It all was considered magic. But the only demarker or demarcation was which god's magic was more powerful over which. And as we know, we got the book. We got all whatever volumes that tell us that Yahweh's magic or Yahweh's power was more powerful than the other gods. So that's
basically the parting of the Red Sea was turning Egyptian water magic on its head.
Yeah, pretty much.
An interesting thing to note is, like, I've actually have been reading up on ancient Near East scholars, and a lot of the difference comes down to theology and how that ancient people seen how magic worked. And a thing that confuses many people is, how can the Bible say, to basically stone witches while having these magical elements in it? And yeah.
So
and yeah.
Go ahead. I'm just getting some water.
So basically, a thing that I say that it has to really do with the way that theology works in the ancient Near East, where in all the other ancient cultures, what they generally believed was that there's this source that's just out there that's permeating the universe, And this is the source of where magic comes from. And people, like regular human, like it's a source that both the gods and humans can use, like the gods and the humans can use alike. And it's actually in many of the other ancient Near East, you can find examples of humans using magic against the gods. So it wasn't something that was something exclusive to the gods. The gods could be hurt by it. And what the ancient Near East, what the thing that the people in the Bible sort of combat is they combat that notion that you can just use magic on God. Like they turn it around on its head where there isn't this magical source out in the universe that humans can just get it. All of that comes from God. God is the source, and if God doesn't want you to do something, he can let you know about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You actually you have magic in the Old Testament. You have magic in the New Testament, specifically with
Simon the Sorcerer.
Simon the Sorcerer, but you also have it with Legion. Are you familiar with the instance with Legion?
Yeah, basically, the demon was referring itself in the likeness of the Roman legionaries.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little bit more to that story. So there was this idea in the ancient Near East called sacred names, and you guys probably already know, but I'll just explain for the audience. So in the ancient Near East, there was this belief that if you knew the name of a supernatural power or entity, you could have power over it. Very weird, very strange idea, but we still kind of hold to that idea today. Rumpelstiltskin. Rumpelstiltskin is a whole story about how this little weirdo steals somebody's baby, and um, in order for the woman to get her baby back, she has to guess the name of this man, Rumpelstiltskin. Harry Potter. If you watch the second Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter finds out Lord Voldemort's real name and it's Tom Riddle when he has some type of power over him. So we still kind of think like that today, but that's one instance of it. So in the New Testament, when Jesus meets Legion, the first thing Legion says is Jesus' name. He says, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Then he goes and say something like, I abjure you by God. So what he's basically saying is, Jesus, son of the Most High God, I know your name. So
Yeshua bar El Elyon.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Yep. Jesus, Son of the Most High. And so we don't catch that because we live 2,000 years apart from the context of what's happening. But this demon is trying to use a magical incantation or a magical protection spell against Jesus. But it doesn't work. And so to your point about, in the ancient world, magic could hurt the gods, but something really interesting is happening with Jesus. It don't hurt him. It doesn't have any effect on him. And what did Jesus say back after Legion said Jesus' name? Legion said, Jesus, Son of the Most High God, I know who you are. And then Jesus says back, he says, what is your name? That was a part of a exorcism technique where exorcists in the first century would find out what a demon's name was and then cast that demon out. And Jesus is implementing that technique with Legion. So Jesus is, I'm sorry to say this to the Christian audience, Jesus in one way or another is using magic, but it's not magic in the way we think it is. Jesus isn't using demonic powers or anything like that. Obviously, it's obviously the powers of God, right? I gotta say that because people are like, oh my gosh, it's demons. No. It's obviously the powers of God, but the way how people in the East would classify what Jesus did would be magic. And this is why you have people in the first century who said that Jesus was a magician, right? So, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and it should be noted that like I was reading up on to prepare for this. I read up on this guy. His name is Daniel Marquette, and he had an article called "Miracle and Magic in the Acts of the Apostles." And in that, he does go over how Luke stresses that, he stresses the pairing of miracles with the preaching of the Gospels. And when he's communicating with people, he doesn't want them to think that the miracles, he doesn't want them to interpret the miracles as being magic in a sense, because basically magic was seen as a power source people could tap into in order to do things. Luke wanted to make clear that none of them were tapping into that source, and it was purely God doing it.
Yep.
So that's sort of how it does flip it on its head, because in the ancient Near East and even in Roman times, magic was something separate from the gods. It was something that could be used to get, like, magic was an ultimate reality, and the gods were just a rung below that reality, and so they could be hurt by it. Whereas with the ancient Near East, they said, well, no, our God isn't lower than that. Our God is that.
The unseen realm.
I see. Our God isn't. Our God can't be hurt by this. Our God is like the essence of this. Our God is the power source itself. That's hilarious. It's kind of like when Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, if you guys have seen Rush Hour, they're arguing about their dads. Yep. My daddy is so great, he did this. Well, my daddy's so great, he caught a bullet with his teeth. I mean, I guess.
Don't talk about my father. Don't you talk about my daddy.
Yeah. Yeah, the magic in the Bible is very, very interesting. You also have there's something called sympathetic magic or contagious magic. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Heard about it.
Yep, sympathetic magic is magic where
It's sympathetic.
it's sympathetic and it's contagious, and uh, it can activate by touch, and the likeness of one object after it's touched can be transferred to another object. So it's activated through touching something, and then the magical powers or the magical properties of one object can transfer to another object. And you see this with I always get these two confused. Is it Elisha or Elijah who heals the boy who was dead? I always get those two confused. I think it's Elisha. Elisha is over top of this dead boy, and Elisha puts his eyes on the dead little boy's eyes. He puts his cheek on the dead little boy's cheek. He puts his arms on his arms, and he lies down on him. And the little boy sneezes 7 times, and then Elisha gets up, and the little boy is back from the dead. Now, what we don't realize is that is a part of transference magic. Transference magic is, like I said, where
something out of the Green Mile.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, the phrase that they would use is "like is like." It was supposed to be like a reflection or a mirror image, and that's actually how the ancients thought about the world. Our world is supposed to be like the world above. Our world is a reflection. So it's no surprise when they do magic. Magic is supposed to be a reflection. Like is like. This is going to become like the other object. And so Elisha, he does this magical ritual where this little boy's dead body becomes like Alicia's body that is alive. So there's a transference of energy and magical properties from Alicia's body to the boy's body. And you see this all throughout the Bible where transference is there. As a matter of fact, in the Adam and Eve story, remember God says, do not eat and do not even touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Why did the author put that in the story? Because contagious magic or sympathetic magic was a part of their world. So those are some examples of sympathetic magic, contagious magic, and you even see this with in I give you guys a hidden gem. You see this in the water into wine miracle. We always argue about, is this scientific? Can it scientifically be proven? Blah, blah, blah. That's not what this story is talking about at all. So, Jesus in the water into wine story, that is a form of sympathetic or transference magic. And Jesus makes, Jesus transfers or Jesus makes the water in the jugs like the wine that is running out, because they didn't run out of wine yet. There was still wine left. So Jesus turns these jugs of water. He makes them like the wine that is in the cups or the glasses that the guests are in. And what activates this? What activates this ritual? Well, the bridegroom, he doesn't even know that there's water inside of his cup. He puts the cup up to his lips and he begins to drink. He touches it. He touches the cup and it's activated. And the water that is in the cup is like the wine that is in the other cups. That is classic transference magic in the New Testament and Jesus' most famous miracle, and we know nothing about it.
And its first miracle, incidentally.
Its first miracle. There you go.
Yeah. And another thing that people don't often pick up on is just how much sometimes the feats in the Bible of magic are actually done in order to, as a polemical tool against societies of the time. Like, for example, the magical practices of the Egyptians actually plays a big role in the Aaron and Moses versus the Egyptian magicians. Like, for example, in the story you have Aaron's staff swallowing the staffs of the Egyptian magicians, and like we say, oh, that's an interesting trick. But what people don't realize is that in Egyptian coffin texts, that when you have something like that happen, where, like, let's say a snake staff or something absorbs another staff, what that meant, like it eats the other staff, what that meant was it was absorbing the powers of it. And yeah, and for example, like a lot of the plagues against the Egyptians was polemics going against.
Well, that seemed to be a literary device to reflect Yahweh's defeat of the Egyptian pantheon.
Yeah, that's what it was. Like, for example, but here's the other thing. It even goes deeper than that, because it also goes after their culture, like, and the own myths that they also had made when it came to their leaders. Like, for example, the Nile turning to blood has parallels to Ramses II, who it was prophesied that him losing a magic contest would turn the Nile to blood.
And that's what happened because he's the pharaoh of the Exodus.
Yeah. And the Nile turning to blood was a common motif in Egyptian mythology, which conveyed that Egypt was doomed.
You can read about that in the Emperor Papyrus. Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting to note that by knowing Egyptian culture, you actually know how the Bible is using the culture against the Egyptians. Basically, he says, "Oh, like your gods are said to control the water," and then what happens is God makes it so like there's something wrong with the water, and so that shows, oh yeah, your gods aren't really in control here.
It's really the God of Israel. Yeah, you get a lot of water stuff going on in there. There's with the babies being thrown into the Nile River, the people at that time, and it's really hard for people to get this. The people at that time wouldn't have thought that the Pharaoh was evil for doing that. We think he's evil in our time today, but in the ancient world, and this still is kind of like in the realm of magic. It's still
Well, certain pharaohs
supernatural.
were evil.
Yeah, and the way how people would judge a dispute in the ancient world is people would normally throw people into a river. If you go to the Kota Hammurabi, it talks about if a woman is cheating on her husband, they can find out whether or not she cheated on her husband by throwing her into a river. And if she drowns, well, that means she cheated. If she doesn't drown, she didn't cheat.
That's a hell of a
So,
test.
like, absolutely crazy. But you
It
have
works.
to think. You have to think. Maybe there was a method to their madness. Maybe. So what you see when the Pharaoh kills those babies in the Nile, Moses, his mom, puts them into a basket and he goes up the river and the Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses. But why doesn't the Pharaoh's daughter kill Moses? Why doesn't the Pharaoh kill Moses? Because the gods have deemed Moses worthy because he wasn't drowned in the river. He survived. And because he survived, the gods have deemed him worthy. Or the God of Israel, right? So very interesting stuff. And then when you get to the end of the story, how does the Pharaoh die? Well, allegedly, right? Because I know Dr. David Falk doesn't think that he died, but just for the sake of this conversation, how does the Pharaoh die? The Pharaoh dies the same way that he died the same way he killed the Israelites, the same way. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and
That would be interesting if Ramses didn't die of other causes.
Yeah, yeah.
an interesting thing to also point out is like a dispute that often happens in Christianity is how to interpret the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And what's actually pretty funny about that is it is actually more of a polemic on Egyptian beliefs about how you would like in ancient Egyptian mythology they had like the worthiness test where it was believed that in the afterlife your heart would be weighed on a scale, and if it was heavy it would it would be if it weighed more than the like a feather of righteousness, then it would be eaten and devoured and they would be gone or whatever, you'd be sent to their hell. And so that the God hardening the Pharaoh's heart plays on that because it basically means essentially that the Pharaoh is basically doomed.
I didn't think of it that way. What heart weighing heavy on the scales of Anubis?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Anubis or even Mayat, because Mayat was the goddess of order, and so some versions of that is the pharaoh in the afterlife would stand before the goddess Mayat. Mayat will pull the pharaoh's heart out of his chest, and she would put his heart on a scale. She would take her feather out of her hair, and she would put her feather on the other scale, and she would weigh the heart of the Pharaoh against her feather. And if his heart outweighed her feather, then there would be some weird Egyptian dogs that would come drag him into the underworld, and he wouldn't be able to go into the field of reeds. So what you have is the God of Israel is making this proclamation that you guys know how Mayat judges the heart and she turns the heart into stone. Yeah, there's a new sheriff in town, and Mayat isn't the one who's judging hearts anymore. I am. I judge the heart now.
Yeah. And it also goes into why, whenever people talk about, like people don't understand like how when they ask in the Bible, like it's people asked God in the Bible, what is your name? And God just says, I am what I am. And the reason why God does that is because, like you said, it is believed that if you know the name of something, that you can have power over it. And God's saying, you don't have power over me. I'm not telling you my name. You can just, I am what I am. So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why when you get to the New Testament, Jesus is exalted so high. He has a name that nobody knows. Why does he have a name that nobody knows? Because nobody can control him. Nobody can have power over him.
mhm. Yeah. And it is just interesting to know how that sort of stuff works with how it's interesting to know how polemics actually goes into it. Another story that is in the Bible is King Saul's use of the witch of Endor in order to communicate with Samuel's ghost. hmm But yeah, so and like the and Samuel's ghost allegedly in the story was very upset about King Saul asking for him, and the reason why is because he went through a witch, the conduit, and that was seen as bad magic, and that was showing how King Saul was depraved, and in response to that, basically Samuel told Saul that he was doomed.
Yeah, because there's the good guy and the bad guy. Okay, we're almost Wayne's got to go soon, so we can just leave it off here.
Yeah.
All right, where can we, our dear audience, find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website at www.anesecrets.com. A as in Apple, N as in New York, E as in ear, ANE secrets.com, ancient near eastern secrets.com.
All
All
right.
right.